The principal's voice cut through the buzzing hallway like a siren. You're suspended for cheating, and you'll sit out the finals. My heart slammed against my ribs as every eye in the corridor zeroed in on me, and the whisper that followed turned into a roar. He's a cheat, don't be friends with him. I could feel the weight of a dozen stares pressing down, the kind of judgment that makes you wish the floor would open up and swallow you whole. 2 weeks earlier, I'd been sitting in Mr. Alvarez's algebra class, the test a maze of variables I hadn't grasped. Panic surged. I glanced at Maya, the girl everyone admired for her perfect scores, already scribbling answers. Desperation overrode my pride. I slipped my notebook under the desk, opened it to the copied formulas, and started copying. The first few answers felt like a lifeline. I didn't notice Maya's eyes flicking over. When Mr. Alvarez collected the tests, he paused at my desk. Hand this back to me, he said, his tone flat. He lifted the paper, glanced at my answers, and his eyes narrowed. I'll need to speak with you after class. Later, in the empty classroom, he placed the test on his desk. You copied from a source that isn't yours, he said, his voice low but firm. He handed me a slip of paper, my name, the charge, the suspension. You have a right to appeal, but you'll need to own up to this. The next day, Maya approached me at my locker. I heard what happened, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Everyone's talking. They're saying you're a cheat, that you don't deserve friends. I felt a sting. I messed up, I stammered. I was scared, and I didn't think. She crossed her arms. You think that's enough? You think an apology fixes the damage? You've betrayed the trust of the whole class. You're going to sit alone for weeks, and I'm not going to defend you. The words cut deep, but they sparked resolve. I realized the real punishment wasn't the suspension, it was the isolation, the whispered accusations. I decided I wouldn't let that be my final story. I spent the weekend writing a letter to my classmates, explaining the pressure, the mistake, and taking full responsibility. I printed copies and slipped them into each locker, including Maya's. When I returned to school on Monday, the hallway felt colder than ever. I walked straight to the front of the room during homeroom, my heart pounding. I held up the stack of letters. Everyone, I have something to say, I began. I cheated on Mr. Alvarez's test. I'm not here to make excuses. I was scared of failing, and I chose the wrong path. I know I've let you all down, and I'm sorry. I understand if you don't want to be friends with me. I'm serving my suspension and will accept whatever consequences come my way. But I also want you to know that I'm working to earn back your trust, starting with being honest from now on. The room was silent for a breath. Then, slowly, Maya stepped forward. I appreciate you owning up to it, she said, her tone softer. What you did was wrong, and the fallout is real. But I also know that people can change if they're willing to put in the work. She glanced at the rest of the class. If anyone wants to give him a chance, I'm willing to start with a study group for the next test. A few heads nodded. I felt a weight lift, not because the punishment vanished, but because I'd taken back control of the narrative. The next weeks were a blur of extra tutoring sessions, community service hours, and countless apologies. I helped younger students with their math, and each time I saw a light bulb flicker on a kid's face, I felt the sting of my earlier mistake fade. By the time my suspension ended, I wasn't the same kid who had slipped a notebook under a desk. I was the kid who stayed after school to help Maya solve a tricky quadratic, the kid who earned a thank you note from a freshman who finally grasped factoring. The whispers in the hallway turned into nods of acknowledgement, and the label cheater began to dissolve. Looking back, I realized the real lesson wasn't about grades or the fear of failure. It was about the power of accountability. When you own your mistakes, you give yourself the chance to rewrite the story, to rebuild the bridges you thought were burned. Cheating may have cost me a semester, but honesty gave me something far more valuable, the respect of those around me and, most importantly, my own peace of mind. The moral is simple, shortcuts may get you there faster, but they also lead to dead ends. The only sustainable path is the one you walk with integrity, even when the road gets steep.